Project Firestart was released by Electronic Arts in 1989 on the Commodore 64, a game developed by those masters over at Dynamix. Designed by company founders Jeff Tunnell and Damon Slah, it was one of the last few C64 games that stumbled out the door from Electronic Arts, as the company's focus had completely changed to the newer consoles and the emerging more powerful DOS-era computers. The game was essentially released to zero fandom and marketing and didn't even receive an official European release, one of the C64's biggest markets. If only they knew at the time what the significance of this game would mean, and the complete new genre it literally created. Your ever-lovable Nintendo fanboy will gladly inform you that the Famicom-only release of Sweet Home by Capcom is the first survival horror game ever made, as in their eyes computer games didn't actually ever exist, because as we all know it, Nintendo created everything, but that would simply be incorrect. Project Firestart was released months before Sweet Home, and not only that, it literally features every element of the genre in this single game, something Sweet Home didn't even manage. Don't get me wrong, they are both ground zero for the genre, but Sweet Home's multiple character gameplay and turn-based RPG action is not what the genre is generally known for. Project Firestart, on the other hand, a grand science fiction survival horror game, was it. It featured a single controllable character's survival, minimal but very atmospheric sound design, limited resources, lost documents to fill in the backstory, exploration, relentless but limited enemies, massive cinematic overtones, horror movie style jump scares, and a huge amount of multiple endings depending on character choices. It's an exhausting list, that's for sure, but it had to be said, as now you understand why Firestart is survival horror at its original core. Here's Jeff Tunnell, director on Firestart's origins. This game should never have been attempted on the Commodore 64, since the entire project was written in 6502 assembly. The biggest problems were memory constraints. Derek Lukaszak, the lead programmer, would come in day after day, month after month, and hammer on the code to get it to fit. One time he was looking through a monitor program and found 12 extra unused bytes in the OS. He was ecstatic, and it let us move forward. 3 years was a long time for the development of a game that we got paid less than $50,000 in advances to create.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Survivor of the Nostromo.
It's here! Come on,
Get away from her, you...
Told through really elaborate and very effective movie-style cinematics, the story unfolds that the spaceship the Prometheus is orbiting Titan, a moon of Saturn. The scientists on board were genetically designing creatures which were going to be used to brave the harsh conditions of Titan, to mine for resources for the company. They now lost all communications with the ship and crew, and send you, John Hawking, to investigate and retrieve the data and, if necessary, self-destruct the ship. Besides reading all the research files and finding the data tapes which fill in the cool backstory of the ship and crew's demise, you also have to keep in contact with your base so they know you're still alive. Plus, you're not alone. Besides the multiplying creatures that have taken over the ship, there are 2 other humans alive. Anar, a dodgy scientist assistant that's basically Burke from the movie Aliens, and Mary, a female scientist in cryosleep who can be released and becomes part of the main storyline. The story, and I mean the pace in which it is told, and minimal human interaction are one of its most well-constructed features. Here's Jeff on the game's story elements. Everybody was inspired by Aliens back in those days. It was just so good. How could young game makers not be inspired? We never worried about competition or similar games, we just focused on our own thing. It was early enough in the industry that everything was new. There was no such thing as a horror genre. In fact, I never thought of Project Firestart as a horror game, I thought of it as science fiction. Gameplay is a combination of side-scrolling action elements, isometric style exploration and investigation, and adventure choice-based elements which send the story down new paths and one of the many endings. It may not paint a romantic picture, but the switch between side-scrolling in the corridors and isometric perspective in the rooms was driven by technology, not story. The C64 used character graphics that took up a lot less memory than bitmap graphics. That tech worked great for scrolling, either horizontally or vertically, so we used it for the hallways. But we needed more detail in the rooms to bring across the story, so we switched to the isometric view for those. The action is slow and deliberately makes you feel like the creatures have the upper hand. You can find multiple laser guns which up the firepower, but the deliberate execution of having to stand still to shoot, also a trope of the genre, makes running the better choice if you can. You can search dead bodies and rooms for resources, heal yourself with medkits or in a medical bay, and most importantly look for research data and read people's logs on the computers to put all the backstory together. Random cutscenes are also triggered showing things happening in other parts of the ship, which really brings home that cinematic feel. I absolutely did not want a shoot 'em up arcade game. I wanted it to be more about storyline and thinking. Accordingly, as early as the initial designs, I opted for a slow burn narrative style. I wanted it to be kind of safe at first, then get more intense as you discover what is actually happening on the ship, so that the player would feel torn at the end. Save Mary or yourself. In fact, the entire game in a way comes down to that choice. The presentation and audio really served the game well. Graphically, it's very good. They used rotoscoping techniques for animation on the main commander you talk to and many other aspects. The isometric 3D rooms make them feel much more immersive to explore, even though it was a result of a technical issue, and the opening music tune really sets the bleak tone with some very good spot effects. It's not a relentless pumping European soundtrack, it's desolate for a reason and helps the overall vibe out tremendously, and the abundance of well executed cutscenes, still a very uncommon thing in games back then, really pushed the notion of storytelling within a game. Here's Jeff on this aspect. That multi-storyline aspect was the goal of many of us in the industry back in the day. It was what we thought would separate interactive fiction from traditional narrative media. Overall, it is survival horror in every single way, or more actually, survival horror is Project Firestart, a game that I only feel in the last decade or so has started to get some sort of recognition it actually deserved. I played this game way back in circa 1990 and it was super impressive. I didn't even realize at the time I was playing a new genre of game. The whole experience simply had me on the edge of my seat constantly, and it deserves all the praise it never got upon its original Fire and Forget 1989 release. But I'll leave Jeff to give the final words on the game. Trip Hawkins was an amazingly charismatic guy. He could suggest things that would make his entire group of developers go to great lengths to attempt to achieve. In actuality, we had no business attempting to make Project Firestart. It was too ambitious for the platform at the time. All these years later, I still have scars from the development of that game.